Some objects should never be touched. Some gifts should never be accepted. And some whispers should never be heard. But when my wife put on that ring, she changed. At first, it was subtle, long, empty stares, whispered words in a language she didn't know. Then, she tried to kill me in my sleep. Welcome to eerie, short, and scary stories, where the darkness speaks, and the past refuses to stay buried. Tonight, we uncover a tale of ancient sorcery, possession, and a curse that refuses to be forgotten. This is The Haunter of the Ring. My name is James Gordon, and for most of my life, I thought horror belonged in stories. Legends passed down to scare children, fables meant to keep people from wandering too far into the unknown. But I was wrong. I know that now. It started with a ring. A small, ancient thing, gold, with an eerie black stone set in the middle. My wife, Evelyn, received it as a gift. Yosef Vrolok, an old family acquaintance, had sent it to her with a letter that simply read, "This belongs to you now." That was all. No explanation. No warning. Just those 5 words. At first, she laughed it off. It was just a ring, she said. Just a piece of old jewelry. She slid it onto her finger without a second thought, admiring the way it caught the light. But that night, that was the first time she woke up standing over me. Her eyes were open, but they weren't hers. They were hollow, empty, focused on something that wasn't there. I whispered her name, gently at first, then louder. No response. It was only when I shook her that she blinked, gasped, and stumbled back as if she had just woken from a nightmare. But she had no memory of it. None at all. Evelyn had always been a deep sleeper. She never talked in her sleep, never walked around. But after that night, it became routine. Some nights, she'd sit up suddenly, her breathing slow and steady, her head tilting ever so slightly, listening. Listening to something I couldn't hear. And then came the whispers. Soft at first. Just a murmur under her breath, barely noticeable. But soon, the words became clearer. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language I recognized. I tried recording it once, just to prove to myself I wasn't imagining things. But when I played it back, the only thing on the tape was silence. Evelyn dismissed it. She was tired, she said. Stressed. Maybe she had been dreaming. Maybe I was dreaming. But I wasn't. And neither was she. The turning point, the moment I knew without a doubt that something was horribly wrong, happened 3 weeks after she first put on that ring. I woke up in the dead of night to the feeling of something pressing against my throat. Evelyn was on top of me, her hands wrapped around my neck, her face inches from mine. But it wasn't her face. Her eyes were black. Completely. No whites, no irises. Just deep, endless black. And she was smiling. I tried to speak, to move, but my body refused to obey. My vision darkened at the edges. I was seconds away from losing consciousness when, suddenly, she gasped and released me. She fell back, clutching her hands to her chest, eyes wide in horror. She kept repeating the same thing over and over. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. James, I swear, I didn't mean to. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But I could still feel the pressure on my throat, the burning where her nails had dug into my skin. And that smile, that inhuman, twisted smile, that wasn't my wife. Not anymore. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Stress, exhaustion, maybe even some kind of sleep disorder. People do strange things when their minds are pushed to the edge, and Evelyn had been restless for weeks. Maybe that was all it was. Maybe she was just tired. But then, she came at me with a knife. I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen when I felt something behind me. Close, too close. Before I could turn, a sharp, cold edge pressed against my back, right between my ribs. Evelyn was standing there, holding the knife in both hands, her knuckles white. She wasn't speaking, wasn't blinking. Just staring at me with that awful, vacant expression. I took a step forward, slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. The knife slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the counter. She blinked, inhaled sharply, and then, nothing. Just confusion. She had no memory of picking up the knife. No memory of following me into the kitchen. The next time, she tried to drown me. I was in the bath, my eyes closed, letting the warmth soak into my skin. I didn't hear her come in. Didn't sense her at all. The first thing I felt was the pressure, both of her hands forcing me under, pushing with a strength she shouldn't have had. I thrashed, kicked, tried to pry her fingers away, but she was locked in place, unmoving. My lungs burned. My vision blurred. And just when I thought I was going to die, she let go. I shot up, gasping for air, coughing water from my lungs. Evelyn stood over me, trembling, tears in her eyes. She kept saying my name over and over, asking what had happened, asking why I looked so afraid. I knew then that this wasn't exhaustion. This wasn't stress. Something was happening to her, something beyond explanation. I needed help. I turned to John Kirowan. He wasn't just a friend. He was someone who knew things. Strange things. Things most people refused to acknowledge. If anyone could make sense of this, it was him. I told him everything. The sleepwalking, the blank stares, the whispers in her sleep. The knife. The bath. I expected him to be skeptical, to tell me it was all in my head. Instead, he sat in silence, listening, his expression growing darker with every word. Then he asked, "Has she received anything? A gift? Something unusual?" For a moment, I didn't understand. And then, like a puzzle piece snapping into place, I remembered. The ring. I told him about it. How Vrolok had sent it with no explanation. How Evelyn had worn it. John didn't mince words. The ring wasn't just old, it was ancient. Older than most civilizations, older than the languages we speak today. And it carried something with it. Something that had been waiting. He told me about Thothamon, a sorcerer whose name had been erased from history. A man or thing who sought power beyond human understanding. His followers crafted objects like the ring, not as jewelry, but as vessels. They weren't meant to be worn. They were meant to bind. And Evelyn, she had unknowingly invited something in. The ring wasn't just clinging to her. It had rooted itself in her. I left John's place that night with my mind racing. My skin felt too tight, like my body was rejecting the very air around me. I could still hear his warning in my head. Whatever has attached itself to Evelyn, it won't let go willingly. When I got home, the house felt different. The air was thick, heavy, humming with something unseen. I stepped inside, and the floorboards creaked under my weight, louder than usual, like they were protesting my return. And then I saw her. Evelyn was standing in our bedroom, but she wasn't asleep. She wasn't awake, either. She was just there, motionless. The ring on her finger gleamed, even in the dark, as if it had a light of its own. Her lips were moving, forming words, but no sound came out. I took a step closer. Her head twitched, just slightly, like a puppet on a string. And then, a voice. A voice that was not hers. "You should have stayed away, Gordon." The words scraped through the air, dry and ancient, layered over each other like 100 voices speaking at once. My body locked up. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But all I could do was stand there as my wife, or whatever was inside my wife, slowly turned her head toward me. The eyes that met mine were not Evelyn's. They weren't even human. She belongs to us now. I don't remember moving. I don't remember how I got out of that room. The next thing I knew, I was in my car, the engine roaring as I sped back to John's place. He didn't look surprised to see me. He just sighed, sat me down, and poured a drink. Then he said another name. Vrolok. Except that wasn't his name at all. The man who gave Evelyn the ring, the one who wanted this to happen, was someone far older than he appeared. A name whispered in old books, in forgotten places. Yosef Vrolok. And he was the reason my wife was no longer my wife. Vrolok's study smelled of old parchment and melted wax. Books older than any library lined the walls, their covers cracked, their pages brittle. The candlelight flickered, casting strange, twisting shapes along the ceiling. He sat behind a heavy oak desk, watching us with something between amusement and pity, his fingers tapping lazily against the wood. When I told him why we were there, he didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He just laughed. A dry, rasping sound that seemed to settle in my bones. "You can't stop it," he said, his voice smooth, almost sympathetic. "It's already here." Before I could respond, the air shifted. It was sudden, like the room itself had taken a breath. A sharp, metallic tang filled my mouth. And then Evelyn stepped through the doorway. Only, it wasn't Evelyn anymore. Her limbs jerked unnaturally, each movement too sharp, too sudden, like something inside her was still figuring out how to use a human body. Her head tilted in a way that should have broken her neck, her lips curling into a grin that stretched too wide. And her eyes, they weren't eyes. They were empty. Not just dark, absent. She moved fast. Faster than anything human should. I barely had time to react before she lunged. Kirowan was quicker. His hand shot forward, throwing something. Salt? Powder? I didn't know, but whatever it was, it worked. The moment it touched her skin, she recoiled with an unnatural shriek, her body twisting backward, bones popping in and out of place. But it wasn't enough. The lights exploded, plunging the room into darkness. Shadows stretched and swirled, moving like they had minds of their own. A low, guttural growl filled the space, vibrating in my chest. And then Vrolok screamed. Not in pain. In terror. I turned just in time to see his body convulse. His hands clawed at his own face, his nails raking deep, bloody trenches into his skin. His mouth opened wide, too wide, his eyes rolling back. "No, no, and oh," he shrieked, but his voice was lost beneath something else. A sound so ancient, so wrong, it made my stomach churn. Something invisible ripped through him, pulling at his flesh, dragging him toward nothing. His body contorted, his limbs folding inward like paper, his scream stretching into a sickening, inhuman wail. And then, he was gone. Just gone. The room fell silent. The air grew still. The presence that had loomed over us, pressing against our skin, was gone. And there, on the floor, lay the ring. It looked different now. The gleam was gone, the unnatural shine replaced with dull, lifeless metal. It was just a ring again. Just an object. But as I stared at it, heart pounding, breath shaking, I knew the truth. This wasn't over. Evelyn collapsed the moment Vrolok was gone. Her body crumpled to the floor, boneless, like a puppet with its strings cut. I rushed to her, my hands shaking, my breath uneven. For a moment, I thought she was dead. That whatever had been inside her had drained her completely, left her as nothing but an empty husk. But then she stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, and I saw her. The real her. Confusion flickered across her face, then fear. She looked at me, at the broken room around us, at the faint scorch marks on the floor where Vrolok had stood, and whispered, "What happened?" She didn't remember. Not the ring. Not the voice that had spoken through her lips. Not the way she had lunged at me, again and again, with hands that weren't her own. I wanted to tell her, to make her understand. But as she shivered in my arms, I couldn't bring myself to speak the words. We left that house before dawn. We left the city, too. packed what little we could, abandoned the rest, and drove until the roads blurred together. I told myself it was over, that whatever had slithered into our lives had been buried with Vrolok. For a while, I believed it. Months passed. We settled into a new place, a small town where the nights were quiet, where people smiled at strangers, where the horrors of the past felt distant. Evelyn started painting again. I convinced myself that the worst had passed. Then, one night, I woke to the sound of whispers. Faint, like breath against the walls. The kind of sound you almost convince yourself isn't real. I held my breath, listening, waiting. But the room was still. I turned over, expecting to find Evelyn asleep beside me. But she wasn't. She was sitting up, staring at me. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, locked onto my face as though seeing something I couldn't. And her hands were reaching for me. Before I could speak, her fingers brushed my throat. Just the lightest touch. A ghost of a movement. Then, suddenly, she gasped and recoiled, her own hands flying to her mouth. Her breathing came in quick, panicked bursts, her entire body trembling. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I didn't move. I didn't speak." I only watched as realization dawned in her eyes, as she pulled her hands against her chest like they didn't belong to her. Neither of us slept that night, because deep down, we both knew the truth. It didn't end that night. It never ended. Some things don't end. They stretch, thin as a whisper, lingering in the spaces we can't see. You move forward, rebuild, tell yourself you left it behind. But it's there, waiting. Evelyn tries not to talk about it, but I catch her staring into mirrors longer than she should, as if expecting something to look back. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, she wakes up without knowing why. She grips my arm so tightly it leaves bruises. I ask her what she sees. She never answers. Last week, I found something in the attic. A box we never unpacked from the old house. It should have been filled with books. Instead, there was only one thing inside. The ring. It sat there, dull, lifeless. But when I picked it up, it was warm. Warmer than it should have been. I didn't tell Evelyn. I didn't throw it away, either. I couldn't. My fingers curled around it before I even thought to stop myself. And then, that night, I woke up to find Evelyn sitting up again. Her breath was slow, measured. She wasn't looking at me this time. She was looking at the closet. I asked her what was wrong. She didn't move. Then she whispered, "It's open." I turned my head. The closet door was shut. It had always been shut. I started to tell her that, to reassure her, but when I looked back at her face, I stopped. Because she wasn't looking at the door anymore. She was looking just beside it. And she wasn't blinking. Some curses don't die. They wait. They linger in the cracks of reality, watching, listening, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, the haunter of the ring isn't finished yet. If you found this story interesting, share it. Let more people see what really happens. And if you want to hear more true crime cases like this, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories out there, some waiting to be told, others still unfolding. This is Eerie Short and Scary Stories. See you next time.